I felt like it was my civic duty to go and see the Resident Evil movie. So 11 a.m. today, I bought my ticket. I stopped at Wendy's beforehand. I put 2 double stacks in my pockets to eat during the movie like a weird, gross dude. I sat next to a random bored grandma and fired it up and whoo boy. Okay, so here's the deal. You guys know what I try and do here, right? I'm here to talk about stuff I love. I love Resident Evil. It and Metal Gear Solid were essentially my first video game obsessions, where I went super deep. I fell in love with the lore. I played them endlessly. And, you know, I've also been to the void. I have seen the pit of despair that the Resident Evil brand can be. There are lots of ups and downs, and this movie, as they started to reveal it, you know, and there were set photos and stuff, it seemed like it was pretty cool. They were going for it, dude. They were making a Resident Evil movie from, like, stuff from the original 2 games. Wow, could be cool. It's complicated. I don't want to be a Grinch, and again, I'm just talking about this stuff because I love it, but if you guys want to see me not like something, this is something I didn't like. Now, I have a lot to say about it. It's not all bad things, and this is all going to be spoiler-free, just so you know. I'm going to talk spoilers towards the end of the video, but I will let you know when I go into spoilers. The TLDR or whatever right at the start is that I wasn't crazy about it. I understand that, like, some people can at least have some fun with it. There were moments, there were flashes of something really cool. There were flashes of passion and just interesting stuff. But ultimately, I found it to just kind of feel like a waste of time and money and just kicking the rights of a Resident Evil movie brand down the road. You know, does that make sense? I might be in the minority. Some people might be able to go on this like little roller coaster ride and see their favorite references and get excited. And I get that sometimes. But here, it all felt pandery for me. And again, I don't want to insult anybody who had fun seeing this movie at all. I love you if you do. But for me, it felt like, hang on. Whoa! I feel like this movie, like, you know, you might have a hoot with it if you just played Resident Evil 1 and 2 back in the day and loved them, and that was it. If you're a normal person, if you're someone like me, or maybe you're one of the people watching this video where you're a crazy person and you play these things over and over again and you obsess over them, now, I want to be clear here. I didn't dislike it because it changes things. Obviously, what it does here is it mashes up Resident Evil 1 and 2 and tries to make it into one story. And I actually think that was a pretty clever idea, an admirable idea. It makes sense. Things take place kind of around the same time. Here, it's like it's aggressive, and what it ultimately does is make for a rushed feeling movie where there's no time for anything to really breathe, and then stuff just happens for no reason, and then the movie's over. You know, and it felt like kind of like it tried to nail the greatest hits of some Resident Evil stuff and then make some other bafflingly weird decisions in the meantime. Now, I can totally handle big story or character changes if it actually services a broader, better story. You know, it's why I love comic books. I've said this a bunch of times in videos, but like, I love different interpretations of my favorite characters and new stories and new spins, like, while keeping the core foundations, you know. And Resident Evil can go that way. You can take the pillars of Resident Evil, why it's scary, why it's cool and over the top, why we like these characters, Umbrella, blah, blah, blah. There's so many things that you can put in a pot where it can still feel respectful, but tell a new, interesting story or tell a stronger one. It makes some interesting changes, especially towards the start, where I start to think like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. You know, like little flashes of creativity here in this. I did really like. So the first thing is Raccoon City itself. Raccoon City here is really like literally a industry town. It feels like a Midwest town. It's an industry town that was the boom of Umbrella being involved with the town, and then Umbrella packed up shop and left, and the town, according to this, is a ghost town. And what I actually liked about it was that it didn't feel like random weird city in the Midwest. It felt like just a Midwest, you know, mid-city, you know, no subways, no like crazy things, big buildings. It was pretty subdued, and it felt realistic. And I was pretty like into it right from the start. But where every cool little thing that they do, like that's a cool concept. You know, some little character tweaks here and there could have been interesting if they really followed through on them. And also just little action moments that had flashes of just like, ooh, that's cool. Ooh, they get it. You know, like there were little bits here and there, but all of it just felt like it didn't amount to anything. And I actually found myself a little bored a lot of the time. I think a lot of it was because it squandered the potential. Like it went for big, where like the other Resident Evil movies, some people love them, some people hate them, whatever. But they did their own thing. They almost maybe realized that they couldn't do the Spencer Mansion, so they said, fuck it. We're not gonna do that. Here, this movie was like, no, dude, we're doing it. We're doing the police station. We're doing Spencer Mansion. We're doing all of that stuff. And none of it really showed why we like this stuff. Like as a ambassador of video games, if I were to show this movie to someone, I don't think they would get why I like this stuff. Even down to like the Spencer Mansion, when they, first of all, they just walk up to it. Like the Spencer Mansion, underwhelming. The police station, underwhelming. So many little iconic areas were just green screen moments. And then the rest were just cheap shot in a random building type things, even down to the last encounters. Everything felt really small scale, and not small scale in a good way, like an indie movie or just something that's a little more personal and contained. It just felt cheap and rushed. Tonally, and just the way it approached the characters and the vibe and the atmosphere, or really the lack of atmosphere. This movie didn't really have a lot of atmosphere for me. All of that stuff just didn't really do it for me. And I'm not like this uptight guy. If it was just like a fun, wacky time, I'm into that too. And the movie certainly embraced that at times. There's some decent jokes. They do a lot to try and set it in the 90s with a couple of like 90s songs, which again, a little creative, a little interesting, but it didn't really form a whole thing for me. It was just kind of like, what is this movie? And I think if you've never played Resident Evil, you're gonna be like, what is this movie? It's not all offensive. It's like back and forth, right? So it's like the zombies and the origin of the zombies and the look of the zombies. As someone who likes horror movies and practical effects and makeup and the history of how these zombie movies were made and all that, there's none of that here. The zombies are just a bummer all around for the most part, until I get into spoilers. But like, when they have little things like a cool zombie dog or something like that, there's always another moment that made me groan or made me just kind of like, okay, what are we doing here? This is boring. And then some of the references, I am not the type of person to be mad at movies chock full of references and just trying to have fun and just trying to throw in fan service. There's a fine line, of course, and everybody's limit is different. Everybody feels differently about this stuff. But for me, the really top level references that they threw at me here, a lot of them felt jarring, like they didn't need to be there. They felt like they didn't make sense. And there's almost like a whole character and plot point that is just like a, look, we're doing this type reference. And it didn't work for me at all. So it's not all offensive. As someone who I wasn't into the previous Resident Evil movies at all. I do think this is better than that. Full stop. Some people might not agree because you could just take those as popcorn action movies, whatever. This is whatever. It's the better Resident Evil movie, but it still doesn't necessarily make it a good one. A lot of the changes they made, a lot of the concessions they made, a lot of the twists and how they intertwine the stories seemed like it would be setting up interesting things. The fact that a lot of the characters have different origins and stuff like that, like Leon's character has a little bit of a different angle. And I was like, oh, that could be interesting, especially to kind of maybe service the Leon growth and going forward. But it didn't really do anything there. Like it had so many things like that. And that's ultimately why I was disappointed. Not to mention the fact, like, they at least tried stuff with Chris, Claire, and Leon, but everybody else, oh my God. First of all, for Richard Aiken to be one of the main guys, where's Barry? What's going on? Wesker was pretty lame. They had Chief Irons in the movie, and then he was just a clown show. The unfortunate thing is that it's like a lot of missed potential, because it's like that meme from Rogue One. It was like we were this close. We were this close to greatness. Like, some of it feels like that. And I think if they just did a little more, or if the movie had a little bit more of a runtime and didn't try and like really cram 2 games into a very skinny, not very long movie, could have been better. Again, like not to talk in circles, but the fact that it for me really like left some characters in the dust or like totally lame also didn't help. Like Jill is like nothing in this. Really the cast or all the major actors here for me were unconventional picks for the characters, but they mostly worked well, even if they didn't have a lot to go on, you know? I did like Claire. I pretty much like Chris. Chris should be kind of generic macho guy, and that worked enough here. Leon I actually did kind of like. I liked his charisma. I liked what they were at least setting up, even if it didn't go anywhere and he didn't have much to do. I liked that there were little bits here and there, but again, the rest. Can you tell though, like that I'm not good at like ranting or dunking on things that I don't like? It's difficult for me because I've developed more of a vocabulary about talking about things I like. But this movie just made me appreciate what I have had with Resident Evil, the stories that have been told, the adventures I've gone through from Resident Evil 1 to Code Veronica X to 4, Revelations 1 and 2, everything in between, all that stuff, the fucking light gun game. I love it all. And this just, you know, bummer town. I would say, like, not to quote my buddy Jeremy, but it is a good time maybe if you're drunk, because there is stuff that you can just kind of point at and go, that's the thing, the zombie did the thing, you know. You can do that. You know, maybe if you have a couple beers or a couple of weeds, maybe you'll have fun, but I don't know. That's just me. If you love Resident Evil like I do, you still probably may feel like you owe it to yourself to see it. I don't blame you. But now I'm going to talk spoilers. Just got a couple things, so I'm going to just jump into it. Spoiler warning, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's go. The Spencer Mansion was, I want to come up with a better word than just like crap or it sucks, but those are the words that come to mind. The fact that they just kind of walk up to the mansion and mosey on in takes away all the agency, the desperation, the fact that, okay, so now this is like me ranting, okay, because now that I can talk spoilers. So the fact that just them entering the mansion, all the desperation is gone. The fact that they walk up to it and it looks so underwhelming. It looks like a home in a middle-class neighborhood. And then like they show it again, another exterior shot a couple minutes later, and it looks totally different. What is going on? They walk in that amazing, beautiful entryway lobby. It feels so small. It feels green screened and lame. And then every single room they go into has no identity whatsoever other than generic mansion. They didn't even go in a dining room with a clicking a ticking clock. Whew. Thank you. Wow. All of that stuff, like the fan service stuff like that, was just not so great. The police station, yeah, incredible front entrance. They knew they spent money on that. They knew they hired good set builders because there was a couple shots where it held on it for a little too long. And then the inside is just whatever complete generic building other than a green screen shot of the lobby that just looked weird and out of place, especially like because now they have the thing where they set up this town to be a very small town, right? Where it's a very small Midwestern town. Many of you maybe have been to or lived in. And then they just have the most massive, epic, like, police station. What? Leon was interesting, right? Because I thought the guy was charismatic. I thought he was cool. He had the pretty boy thing going on pretty well. And I could also like look at him and be like, you could be a badass, which is cool. I think for Leon, that's totally fine. And he was kind of funny, and he was kind of like just rookie guy. It worked, but he didn't have enough. And the whole like, your dad's a higher up in some precinct, and you're like a spoiled brat. That was a weird choice to really like lean in on that, but I thought at least it could have told an interesting story of his kind of surpassing that, but it didn't. The way he surpassed that was he showed up at the end with a rocket launcher randomly. Works in a video game, doesn't work here. And really the Birkin monster at the end was like, oh, like you could see it from the first trailer, like it just didn't look good. Where it did look good was his transformation, which again is super rushed and so abrupt. He's gone for almost the entire movie, and then he shows up at the very end and becomes a monster. That's lame. There's no feeling or anything behind it, but there's a shot with him initially hunting for Chris and being like, where are you, Chris? And he's like transforming into Birkin Monster as it's happening. And it was actually really impressive. I feel like that's where like they spent half the money. I was like, holy shit, that's cool. That's something. That's some creativity. Another thing in terms of creativity is the liquor appearance, where it's a little bit like how it would be, albeit it's not in the same location. It's not in a police precinct, but you have Leon slowly looking up and noticing something. But what they did here with the liquor walking, and you can see the neon lights, and then there's darkness above the neon lights, and the thing is walking, so you see all the neon lights swaying. That was pretty cool. That was different. You know, it was like, all right, let's how would we make it cool in real life? And that was really good. Another thing that I think is like the best part of the movie, and it almost felt like there's one part, it felt like, did you ever see the Doom movie with my boy, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson? Do you remember in the end when it just goes into first person mode where Carl Urban becomes Doom guy and it just becomes a Doom movie, a first person shooter? And it was like, wow, that made up for how bad the rest of the movie was. It like actually understood why we like that shit. There's actually one part of this movie that I felt like it was like, oh wow, they really got it. So there's a part with Chris Redfield in a tight situation, zombies clawing at him, and he's desperately fighting his way out. Bam, 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 bam. And the muzzle shots are like, the muzzle flashes are like slow, like lighting the scene here and there, and you see little bits of action. Then you hear him switch to his handgun, and you just keep hearing him running out of bullets, and then he's got his cool knife and he's stabbing the zombies. It was survival horror. That was like the first way, or really the only way a movie has ever really been able to set that across from a video game, where it's, you only have so many bullets and you are outnumbered. And not in like a way a regular action movie would do it, but in a way that actually, it felt tangible here. And it felt like jarringly better than the rest of the movie. I was like, holy shit, that was awesome. Who did that? Pay that man more. That whole part should have been the entire movie. Little bits like that. Some things were creepy here and there. Like Lisa Trevor in the beginning was very cool. I don't like the whole orphanage thing and how they use that, and how Lisa Trevor was just this kind of like thing going around, and how everybody's cool with her, even though she's a ghoul with a skin mask. I like Lisa Trevor, I thought was so effective, and how she was introduced in the remake really well, and how she was just used just enough. I thought that here, with her being in it and written into the plot, felt like weird and awkward. And maybe even a little pandering, like, look, we got her. Like, a lot of that. Itchy Tasty on the window, awkward. Why is that? Another one was a zombie dog jumping through a window, but it was a car window, and they held on the window for so long, and you know what's gonna happen, and it happened, and it looked like shit, and it wasn't scary. Like, stuff like that. You hear a Jill Sandwich quote, you hear all these stupid quotes, and it just, none of it worked for me. And I'm not usually that guy. I'm usually like, okay, cool, I can lighten up and have fun. And I was kind of disappointed here how it just didn't work for me like it usually could have. I think it's because I like Resident Evil so much, and again, everybody goes to Resident Evil for different things. I've talked to people who just love Resident Evil for the gross, spooky monsters. I've talked to people who love Resident Evil for just the tight corridors, the stressful gameplay, and the spooky atmosphere. I've talked about people who really love the over-the-top Japanese aspect of it, where it gets crazy with biochemical warfare and all that shit. So everybody loves it for different reasons, and I think this movie just doesn't really check any of those boxes for me. Honestly, the biggest fan moment in the movie for me, like the best wink nod to fans, was a briefing in the Stars team room where Irons walks in and he's explaining something to the Stars team who sucks and is like not really a very good Stars team. But Leon's also there and he's like, what's going on? And then Irons just freaks out and he's like, what the fuck are you doing in here, Leon? Get out of here. And I thought that was really funny because it felt like the movie was literally emulating how we felt. I hope that was intentional. It felt intentional. And it worked for me. Like, why is he here? Why did they mix that up? Get the fuck out of here. That was funny, but then the movie is just so back and forth, right? So the iconic first reveal of a zombie in Resident Evil is one of my favorite moments ever. It is ingrained into my soul forever. The slow head turn of the zombie. I've talked about it in videos a million times. I sound like a broken record by now. As much as I don't think the makeup or the effects looked very good on this zombie, I will say the way they handled it and how the zombie turns, and all you hear is the blood dripping from his mouth and hitting the floor. That was fucking, ooh, I'm getting goosebumps right now talking about it. That was very well done. So while I didn't think the zombie looked that great, the fact that they did that, they did some attention to it. I thought that was cool. But then you have other stuff, like one of the first other zombies showing up on fire. It's just like a joke and they play music. And also the fact that the zombies weren't even, wait a minute, what the fuck? The way they handled the zombies, they're not even really zombies. They were just kind of like the townspeople slowly changing into crazy people, crazy monsters. I don't know. Was there like a lawsuit? Was there like rights to zombies where they couldn't just have good old shambly zombie boys? Sometimes they kind of gave off that vibe, but then when they're at the gates of the police department, weird. And the fact that you can have this high concept thing of like this corporation controlling a town and lying and slowly poisoning the town is cool. You have that corporation bailing out, having secret laboratories, locking down the town. Seems like big concept stuff, but then the movie just takes place in little hallways and little rooms in John's warehouse in LA that somebody borrowed. Like, it just didn't work. Not to mention the after credit scene, which is like Wesker getting his glasses. I actually went out loud. Like, it was just like, so I'm like, are we gonna really do this? It's just like the stuff we joke about with this, and it just felt like such a bummer. I think the Resident Evil brand still deserves better than this. I think that this is at least a step in the right direction, but I don't know. They took two of the best things from the series and, just botched it. So even if they make another one, like, oh, look, now Wesker's bad and he's got cool glasses, what are we gonna do next? I don't care. I could talk about this for a long time. I've held you guys for too long. I'm kind of just rambling. I could do like a whole podcast episode about it or something. But that's Resident Evil. I really want to hear what you guys think. Thank you for listening. This video is for me. I put it out for me. It's like my therapy to get this out here. But I definitely want to know what you guys are thinking. If you saw it, if you have this weird attachment to Resident Evil and you're 30 and there's something wrong with you as well, and everybody says to you, give it up, loser, but you're not. If you're like me, let me know. Let me know what you thought. If you saw it, if you're holding off, fine. Let's keep it civil. Like I said, everybody comes to Resident Evil for different things. Maybe I'm the Grinch here. If you had fun, don't feel bad. I don't want you to come to my channel and feel like you are being made to feel bad about liking something. No. Let's talk anything Resident Evil down in the comments. Thank you very much. Clicking the like button does still help me here. I would appreciate that. And also shout out to my backers on Patreon and YouTube memberships. Love you very much. Thank you all for being here and listening to me ramble. I'm Jake Baldino. Subscribe because video games. Pizza's on me.